right, so this is going to be a two-part story. And it has to deal with RFK Jr. of all people. Joe Rogan says he supports RFK Jr. And hey, to each their own. To each their own. We all have our choices, you know. I do find it hilarious that, RFK Jr. is being viewed as this outsider candidate when in fact he's as connected to the establishment machine as possible. I mean, yes, he's done some good things, you know. Yeah, can't say the bad without the good without the bad. But I want to just talk about it a little bit. So, podcaster Joe Rogan on Thursday threw his weight behind independent presidential candidate RFK Jr. over either of the major party candidates, making the online influencer known for dabbling in conspiracies one of the Kennedy's most notable endorsements. So, I would say, no, Joe Rogan doesn't do that. This article's from The Hill. Rogan said on his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, that he views both Democrats and Republicans as perverting democratic norms, which is true. This is what they do. That's politics. They do it on the left. They do it on the right. They gaslight you. They manipulate you. They promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is RFK Jr. Rogan went on to add that he's a fan of Kennedy. He's the only one that makes sense to me. Both Kennedy and Rogan have been critical of vaccines, especially with what happened with the pandemic in 2020. So let's go ahead and play up this video here because there's an interesting follow-up article from good friend of the show, Indy from INN News. So let's go ahead and pull up this video of the Joe Rogan Experience talking about his endorsement of RFK Jr.
That's just what they do. That's politics. They do it on the left. They do it on the right. They gaslight you. They manipulate you. They promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You a fan?
Yeah, I am a fan. Yeah, he's the only one that makes sense to me. He's the only one that he doesn't attack people. He attacks actions and ideas, but he's much more reasonable and intelligent. I mean, the guy was an environmental attorney and cleaned up the East River. I mean, he's a legitimate guy. You know, before anybody started calling him an anti-vaxxer, which I thought he was too. I thought he was this nut, this like conspiracy theorist nut, until I read his book. I read The Real Anthony Fauci, and I'm like, what is it? How much of this is real? Because if it's all real, this is fucking insane. And we live in a world where we're being manipulated by these health organizations that are being paid by the pharmaceutical drug interests. And these pharmaceutical drug companies are pumping these products out into the population and telling us that we need them and then making insane amounts of money. And then also the government is in on it. And also they share a patent with Moderna. And also they share profits. And there's $700 million, I mean, however much money was made, whatever the number is that these guys made off of these products. Like this is all of it is fucking crazy. There's the revolving door between the CDC and the FDA and then these pharmaceutical drug companies. So the people that make the regulations then go on to have these cushy jobs with the pharmaceutical drug corporations. Like, oh, nothing to see here. It's like it's open. It's right out in the open.
Right.
And when he talks about all that stuff in his book, you're just like, what the fuck, man? If this wasn't true, he would be sued.
Yeah. But
So it seems to be true.
Yeah.
And it's a scary thing because people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be attacked. You know, they don't want to be called an anti-vaxxer. That's a big one.
Right.
You know.
So let's talk about this because here's the thing. There's a lot to really address about RFK Jr. As much as it would be great to have an outsider candidate, an independent candidate, I have my criticisms of the third-party candidates from Jill Stein to Chase Oliver, RFK Jr., Dr. Cornel West. Let's be very clear about RFK Jr. Him, Trump, and Biden were at one point associated, friends with, or either that interconnected with the Democratic Party. And all three are very close defenders of AIPAC and the Israeli lobby. But, you know, when we say somebody's an outsider, we have to look at their overall campaign. And I think it's very important that we pull up this article here from good friend of the show, Indy from INN News. And I want to give a huge shout to him. This is from his Substack. How much for that running mate seat, Bobby? And this has to deal with his running mate. Who more or less kind of gave him some of that cash money. So I'm not a fan of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and have never really been one. I know he did some good work as an environmental lawyer. He's also called out Big Pharma on some of their corruption, but mostly he's a tangled web of his own ego. Most politicians are. He's connected to shady characters and, of course, the lockstep support of Israel, in spite of daily horrific, nightmarish videos coming from Gaza and the West Bank on a daily basis for 10 months. Which, by the way, folks, now there is reports of unchecked disease and other ailments impacting the people of Gaza, which RFK Jr. said that the Palestinian people are the most pampered people. With some of these skin diseases and other viruses that are now running amok in Gaza, that doesn't look too pampered to me. No cookies for Gaza. As a legacy of American royalty with the last name of Kennedy, he's been steeped in access and privilege for his entire life, which is very true. I could go a lot further, but the point of this piece is that when he announced his run as a Democratic presidential candidate in 2024, there were rumors of a lot of shady characters behind him. Until we can find direct links, we can't talk too much, but we can talk about what happened in plain sight. So let's talk about it. Shanahan. That's right, Nicole Shanahan, the running mate. She paid $2 million into the campaign coffers the day after she was named Kennedy's VP choice. You got to have that cold hard cash to become that Veep, right? I was looking into the FEC website for the funding and found something very interesting. First of all, this is from a tweet screenshot. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s running mate, Nicole Shanahan, gave the campaign $10 million between the end of March and on April 1st, April Fool's Day. That's Hardlands Media's official birthday. Nothing to see here, right? Totally normal in this country for a VP candidate to buy their way onto the ticket, right? Well, it is totally normal. Much love to you, Indy. But it is normal. You can buy your way because somehow, as a vice presidential candidate, one can make unlimited donations to the campaign legally out of her own pocket. How is this legal? So for 4 days, another $8 million got deposited into Team Kennedy, bringing the total to, that's right, a whopping cold hard $10 million US. So according to campaign, this is a screenshot from the Associated Press. According to campaign finance records, Shanahan has long donated to Democratic candidates, including giving the maximum amount allowed to Kennedy when he was still pursuing that party's nomination before switching to an independent bid in October. It was unclear if Shanahan would use her own money on the campaign, but she has already opened her wallet to back Kennedy. Ooh la la. One has to wonder what is going on. She was a driving force and the primary donor behind a Super Bowl ad produced by a pro Kennedy super PAC, American Values 2024, for which she contributed $4 million. In response to criticism following the ad's release, the super PAC said its idea, funding, and execution came primarily from Shanahan. So great for her, right? The super PAC, excuse me, can accept unlimited funds, but is legally barred from coordinating with Kennedy's team. But as a candidate for vice president, Shanahan can give unlimited sums to the campaign directly. That's potentially a huge boost for Kennedy's expensive push to get on the ballot in all 50 states, an endeavor he has said will cost $15 million and require collecting of more than 1 million signatures. Then in June, there were 2 more payments, totaling more than $2.6 million. In all, there were 64 receipts to Team Kennedy from his new running mate and financial backer through June 30th, totaling $12,875,088.24. 1 penny short of a quarter. Come on, don't be that cheap. Of the almost $52 million raised by the campaign. So again, this is what's being shared here. But what does each candidate stand to gain? First of all, RFK Jr. Gets the funding for a national campaign to last as an independent candidate with a chance to be on the ballot until November, but he has to sacrifice some of the direction and narrative of the campaign. There's been a pretty clear connection between Shanahan and the campaign's shift toward crypto and Bitcoin, because nothing says safety more than Bitcoin or crypto as a whole. How many crypto scams are out there? Do you know what a crypto scam is? Because there's a lot of them, my friends. So be careful. Be careful of them indeed. It's pretty clear he's not going to win, but not keeping his campaign afloat until November would ensure that, because there's little chance he'll actually win. Taking the money for the number 2 meaningless job, which is basically a PR job at this point, almost makes sense here. He doesn't give much up. Now, as for Shanahan, Nicole Shanahan, who is she connected to? Well, she's a well-known former DNC bundler. She's also the ex-wife of Google co-founder. Well, that explains where she got some of that money. Sergey Brin. She was the one behind the cringe Super Bowl ad and paid for it through a super PAC. What is her motivation? My goodness. Just remember, kids, nothing is going to fundamentally change. Oh, Indy, why do you have to say it like that? No matter who wins in November, no matter who the candidates are, in spite of whatever fear mongering the corporate news networks will scream. So there you go. This is an article from Indy from INN News. And I want everyone to understand and the Democratic Party and the people associated with it, even if they are not connected to the campaign as a whole, have dark designs, okay? They are all corrupt. We have unchecked corruption in this country. And while, yes, Rogan endorsing RFK Jr. is something interesting, I mean, Rogan does have a huge following on social media. No one can deny it. I think at this point, this election cycle in regards towards third parties and independents has been absolutely disappointing. Now, third parties are getting a lot of coverage and attention, and they're being vilified worse than they have been since 2016. Now we're seeing so many people getting, I guess, attacked, yelled at, smeared on social media because they would consider voting third party. But looking at RFK Jr., he is not that outsider. He's an insider posing as something else. We have seen the videos, we have seen the commentary in which he is close to AIPAC, most notably Rabbi Shmuley. Now, I think enough videos have been said about that guy in regards to some of his questionable policies and perspectives. The less said, the better, because, then we have to start talking more about just how he just conducts himself, which is gross in its own right. But RFK Jr. is not this outsider. He doesn't get it. He's part of the system, which is why it's easy for him to, manipulate voters into thinking that he is this person that's going to change things. One has to wonder what lies in store for this campaign after November, after election night. Does it disappear, or will there be something more coming further on down the road? But when you look at politicians, especially those that come from dynastic families, they're not going to save you. Their main goal is to remain relevant. Their main goal is to trick people and make them remember fondly of better times. Yes, I know JFK and RFK Sr. were seen as these great heroes, these great titans, but they were just men, people who were horribly flawed and made a lot of mistakes. And I think it's important for us to remember that just because somebody carries the last name doesn't mean that you're going to return back to a time of antiquity that never even existed in the first place. We have unchecked corruption and people able to buy their way in. This is not a democracy. This is not even a constitutional republic. What we have here is an unconstitutional system, a system that is trying to make itself or show the American people that it somehow cares about our values. What we have is an oligarchy. What we have is those that are able to bribe the system and buy their way in. And those that buy their way in does not, and nor will ever make them, qualified individuals. We have to be better. And as citizens, our only option at this point is not to rely on somebody who has the correct last name or from the correct family. The real choice right now that we have to do, all of us, is start building movements and organizations not connected to Washington, D.C., not connected to dynastic families, not connected to political families, and break away. We have to break away from this system and start supporting citizen ballot initiatives. And maybe someday we could have maybe a democracy, but we have to fight for it. But being blinded by last names or somebody saying the right things, yeah, it's easy to fall for it. But just remember, there's always a reason and why people are doing what they're doing. It's all about power and influence. And when you have a system in which legalized bribery is A-okay, you're not going to get the best. You're going to get charlatans and frauds.